Guys, today I've got a kind of blast of the past type video for you. We're going to be going over SPS programming on a powertrain control module for a late 90s Saturn automobile, 1996 to 1999. This particular one is from an automatic, and the part numbers at the top correspond both the hardware and the calibration numbers, 210 08 932 and 210 24 490 on this particular model here. And what we'll do first here, before we get into it and talk about why, like everything else with Saturn, this was different than the rest of GM, let me go show you a quick clip on how to locate and remove this particular part from the vehicle while we were in the salvage yard. All right, guys, we're here at the salvage yard pulling a PCM out of this 99 Saturn SL2. And I'm just going to show you real quick how you can get at it. Right on top here in this little coin depression area, or a place where you would store your sunglasses or what have you, there's a couple of little tabs here that you just need to prise off. There's one here, and there's one here. And inside those are a couple of 7mm bolts. We're going to remove those, and then we're going to come back. All right, guys, after you get these bolts out, they're kind of small. Just hold on to those, and then you can take a plastic trim tool, and you're going to work this cover off all the way around until you can remove it. It's just held in by little clips. You kind of see them right here. Maybe, I don't know, a lot of glare right now. Just got one hand here, so bear with me. But that's what you're going to do. You're going to pull this guy up. We're going to continue going. I'm going to have to shift onto the other side, get the other side there, but once you got all these out, you can remove it. All right, guys, we've got this trim piece removed, where we can take it off. You can kind of see the types of clips I was talking about here on all the ends, including this end over here. With that cover off, you can then remove this foam piece that lays underneath it as insulation. And then once you have that foam piece out, right on the driver's side, behind the instrument panel, this guy right here is the PCM. We're going to take a 10mm, we're going to loosen this nut so that we can get it out. All right, guys, a lot of glare here, but hopefully you can see this. We just need to loosen this enough so that we can pull it up like that. Then we're just going to work it out and unplug it. And then just real quick, here's a view with all the connectors. And then just to get them disconnected, it's the type that you just give it a pinch, just like on the radio. These have been on here for a long while, so might not just come off with one hand here. Might have to get a tool, but there's one, right? So we're just going to continue disconnecting these. All right, guys, let's take a look at what's inside this PCM. Like I've done in some previous videos like this, I've got a benchtop power supply, and I've got an off-vehicle programming harness set up so that I can work with these on the bench and test them out. So let's just get these cables hooked up here. We're going to need the two bottom blue ones, and in the automatic case, the pink one. Manuals would have brown instead of pink for some of these connectors, but basically the same setup. And we'll go over the wiring in just a bit, but let's go ahead and get set up to see what we can see on here. So we're going to turn this guy on. We're going to fire up our Tech2. See if we can get a better view on our Tech2, because that's what we're going to be focused on. There we go. Looks better. All right, so right off the bat here, normally when you're doing this kind of work, you would just go into diagnostics, and for a vehicle like this, pick the year, come down here. This one came off of a 99. And you typically go on a passenger car or truck and pick the brand and the product line. But right off the bat, Saturn Special. And it's got its own line in the Tech2 that you can go into. Let me see if I can blow this up just a little bit more for you guys. so you can catch everything when we get to the particular screens we're heading into. All right, so we're going to come in here and we're going to take a look at Powertrain on this 99 Saturn. And first thing I'm going to do to make sure that we've got good connectivity, I'm going to go into data display, engine data display. Of course, you know, there's nothing hooked up here, but what we're after is that we can communicate with the Powertrain control module. And then I'm going to kind of scroll in the up direction and see if I'm able to read ignition voltage correctly. All right, 12.1 volts, and that's feeding in what I'm getting from the bench power supply. So I think that that shows that we got a good power setup. So we're going to back out of that. We're going to come back down here to ID information, and here we can take a look at the calibration ID, 8920. So that was one of the numbers that we will see in TIS2000 for whatever the current level of firmware has been installed on here is. This is probably the factory preload. And then we can come and take a look at the VIN on this particular vehicle and pull that, 301413, and we can come down here under engine information, and we can see the calibration IDs, the Delco model number, which also matched what we saw on the sticker at the beginning, the 8932 number. We see some software IDs along with the ECM's calibration ID. Remember, on a powertrain control module, it's a combination of the engine controller plus the transmission controller. We go down here towards the bottom, and we can see tire sizes, bunch of inaccurate information because of it not having any sensors hooked up, but we can also see ECM software vision, calibration, and hardware numbers. This 210-23940 is a number we're probably going to need later on when we get into TIS. If we go back out of here and take a look at the transmission information, we see similarly, we get to see this information, right? So that's the first thing that's different about a Saturn. It's got its own leg in the Tech2. Let's go ahead and get TIS2000 fired up and take a look at what's different about actually doing the programming. All right, guys, we're here on TIS2000 running on this PC with Windows 2000. Going into the service programming system, we're going to pick pass-through, we're going to pick reprogram, and we're going to pick the off-board programming adapter just because this benchtop setup we have most approximates that. If you're in the vehicle, you're going to pick this, obviously, and you're going to pick replace and reprogram if you're trying to swap one of these out on your own car. So we're going to go ahead and click next here. Okay, it's going to ask us to build the vehicle when we go this pass-through route. So we're just going to pick 99 Saturn. I don't think we're going to have to pick anything else for Saturn. So Saturn 99, continue. It's going to ask us to make sure that everything has got the proper voltage, powered up, all of our connections are good, and that you're sitting on the Tech2 start screen. So they want you to be sitting at the screen here without pressing enter. And so we are in that position as well. Go ahead and click next. You notice down here we got like a, let me see if I can slow this down just a hair. We got like a red connection down here in the lower right. Now it's green. It's pulled up the VIN correctly. So it's reading just fine. We're going to go ahead and hit next. It's going to ask us to manually confirm the emission system. This particular one is federal. Powertrain control module or VCM in the case of trucks, you're always going to pick normal here. Only the dealer would use VCI. All right, so it pre-populates everything. It's just a chance to confirm this is all correct, and it is. This does have remote keyless entry, cruise, and AC, but not ABS. And this is the correct size tires on these 185/65 R15s. Going to hit next. All right, so it comes in. If you remember when we looked at the PCM itself, it had this number on the top, 210-08-920 on the label. This was the, excuse me, on the label, on the Tech2 view. This was the current calibration, and what it's saying is that there is a newer one available, so this has never been updated. There was actually one put out in 210-15-115, which addressed two DTC codes and enhanced how the diagnostics work on firing P0133. Looks like 8920 did some work on P0327, and 8890 would have been the original production firmware for the US, Canada, and Taiwan of all places. So we're going to pick that as the update that we're going to do. We would have done this along with whether we were trying to do an an update to the VIN or what have you. We're going to hit next. And now it tells you that the red Tech2 connector must be used. So this is the next big difference here. I'm going to zoom in on this error message for you. So the Saturns didn't use a standard OBD2 type of connection on their DLC. They had their own thing, right? It's a different kind of car and a different kind of car company. So if I just disconnect this for a moment over here off the camera, I'm going to hold it up where you can see it, so you can understand what I'm talking about here. So what they're referring to is on the end of the cable coming out of the Tech2, we've got a cable like this, right? And this is the connector that plugs into the diagnostic link connector on the vehicle. And these come off, of course, from the end of the Tech2. These come off. And you can put an OBD1 connector on there, or there's some other connectors from the pre-95, 96 era to cover Saab and Isuzu and stuff like that. But for a Saturn, this won't work. This works for every other General Motors vehicle from 96 and up, but into 2013 or so, but it doesn't work for a Saturn. For a Saturn, it's a special one like this that's red. And the reason for that is that the actual OBD2 port wiring is not the same as on a regular GM vehicle. So we're going to install this connector on here, like TIS2000 wants us to. We're going to have to install that in order to get this programming to work properly. So I'm going to go ahead and put this back on the DLC connector on the bench. I'm going to wait for the Tech2 to acknowledge that I plugged it back in. Basically what I like to do if I swap something like that is to turn it off and on. And we're going to say OK up here. And then we're going to start the programming event. So if you take a look down here at the Tech2 itself, I'll just hold it up here on the camera. We can see that we've got communication going over on the Tech2 screen while it gets set up to begin this flashing. You can see now we're going over here, starting the reprogramming. And you got to remember, you know, this is old school stuff, guys, so it moves super slow, super slow. This is what you'll see on the Tech2 while it's going. There's a bit of an animation here just to show you that it's alive in pass-through mode and firing that data over to the powertrain control module. So at this point, it's all what you're used to if you've done this on other vehicles from this era. We're just going to wait for it to do the downloading and the reprogramming, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over, we're going to verify it, and then I'm going to take you through some of the details on why this car has its own special connector. So I just got a few more seconds here. This whole operation is typically around a minute. I mean, back in those days, it probably looked super fast. But compared to where we're at now here in 2021, it's like paint drying, right? All right, here we go. About 20 seconds remaining until we get to the end. And we're only moving 180 kilobytes. A very small amount of information in the modern era here. All right, so we're at the end. We've got it all downloaded, reprogrammed. PCM is probably doing a verify at this point. Nothing special going on the Tech2 screen. Okay, we're back to the main screen indicating that we're done. And then what we see here is disconnect the controller from the off-board programming adapter and install it in the vehicle. Turn the ignition off after you perform that to do a reset. Start the vehicle, make sure you clear any codes that resulted from having unplugged the old one. Like all GM vehicles, this one part is the same. You might have to do a crankshaft position variation learn procedure. You see that a lot with any type of update. All right, so at this point, we've done this calibration update. That part's done. Let's go take a look at the Tech2 and verify that it took, that we got that 115 version down here to replace the one that was on there before. So just give me a second here to get you guys set back up on this screen. Give us a little bit of magnification here. And then let's go back in where we were. Diagnostics, 1999. This happens to be a PCM out of a 1999 SL2. Going to pick Saturn. Powertrain. Going to come straight down here to ID information, calibration ID. And now we've got the new calibration ID applied. And if we had done it, we didn't do it in this step, but if we typed in a different VIN than what had been read, we'd be able to verify that that took with the Tech2 here as well. So now let's go try to understand why does this particular vehicle require this funky special connector on the DLC in order to do its programming. If you don't put this red one on, it won't work. You'll get a variety of errors. I don't remember what they all are, but the black one will not work with the Saturn PCM. So, and again, that's 96 to 99 only, so it was a real short period of time where this part was different. Some of the other differences persisted right up to the bitter end, but this one was only relating to programming in 96 to 99. So let's take a look at the wiring that had to be done here in order to understand why this is needed. All right, guys, let's take a look at a typical General Motors diagnostic link or data link communications connector. This is the thing that sits underneath the driver's side, right underneath the dash area where you plug in the cable that goes into the Tech2. And when we take a look at the wiring, it's pretty typical. Let's see if I can get this a little bigger for you guys. Right, you'll end up with a Class 2 data signal, Class B. You'll end up with some grounds. You'll occasionally have some additional connections in this era for RKEs or supplemental inflatable restraint airbags. You might also have a separate connection for ABS, and then you'll have some transfer for the radio. Sometimes there'll be some additional control modules that are in there, and then you'll have the battery input. When we take a look at a Saturn from this era, it's a little different. This is printed out from the online service manual for Saturn from GM. And we take a look at this, we can see that compared to our standard Chevrolet, try to put them side by side here if I can, compared to our standard Chevrolet, the Saturn one uses pin 1 in 99 only, by the way, to communicate with the airbag module. And then we can see over here it's not used on the other GMs. And whereas pin 2 is used for Class 2 communications overall on the other vehicles, it's only used for PCM communication on a Saturn. The ground connection is the same, right? So pin 4, that's kind of standard, but then pin 5 and 6 are these unique flash return power signal from PCM and flash power to PCM. So that's unique to a Saturn. When we continue going up here, we can see, let's get this out of the way where it's not hung, we can see that pin 8 is about programming to the remote keyless entry module. Now that's not an unusual pin to have, but we can see that's not the same pin normally, right? Remote keyless programming enable is typically on pin 8 on a GM vehicle of this era, and then on Saturn, it's, I'm sorry, it's also on pin 8. My bad on that one. Those are the same. But the serial data communication to the airbag module, it's 98 only for pin 9, where it would normally be the same for these other vehicles. But in 99, it's on pin 1. That's the one I wanted to highlight as different. And then, of course, we have battery plus at the bottom on pin 16. So the big difference are these two flash to and from signals to the powertrain control module. That's what really makes it different. If we go through the rest of this and just highlight how we built the harness. So to build that harness, I ended up connecting up pin 2 so that we have communications to the PCM. I ended up connecting pin 5 and 6 so that we had that flash power to and from the PCM. Of course, I ended up hooking up pin 4 for a ground. And then I ended up hooking up down here at the bottom pin 16, which is our 12 volts. That supplies our power both to the PCM and to the Tech2 that we feed in from the bench power supply. And then when we take a look at the PCM's connectors, we'll start off with this blue one here. This is the bigger of the two blue ones. And when we look at this guy, we want to get pin C8, cavity 8. It's a purple wire. That's our Class 2 connection to the diagnostic link connector. And then we want to get C12, which is a pink That's ignition 1. And that's all we need on this page. There's a bunch of other connection things on here. I'll just kind of like let them sit for a second so you can see there's actually a dedicated line to communicate with the ABS module, for example, on this same connector. If we keep going to the other page, which is this same light blue connector, the big blue one, that's where we'll find connector D9, which is flash power coming from the Tech2. And then we'll find D13, which is 12-volt battery signal to power up the PCM. And then D16, which is flash return, which is part of the programming signal that's handled by that red connector that we saw earlier. Then there's a smaller light blue connector on the PCM here of the two. This is the smaller of the two. And on this page, the connections on this page, we don't need any of these. Just leave it here for a second for reference in case you're looking at a video like this just to get an idea about that. But on the second page of what's in this small light blue connector, we do need B6, which is our ground for the powertrain control module. And then whenever I do these videos, you know, I take any ground I find. B9 happens to be ground for an automatic or manual transmission. We take all grounds because we never know internally how the circuitry might have been designed. And then, of course, we'll take B12, which is a 12-volt signal source to the powertrain control module. The next one on here is the larger of the two pink connectors, and the pink connector here is only for an automatic transmission model. There's a couple of cavities shown here on the first page, but we don't need those for what we're doing. And in fact, we don't need anything from this large pink connector for the benchtop harness, but I'll just scroll through this data just so you can see what's wired where, in case you're looking at this as some kind of reference for a wiring problem or something of that nature. All right, and then the next one it talks about is the brown version of this, which is used in the manual transmissions. The vehicle we showed was automatic, so we didn't touch that, but it's very similar in a size and arrangement to the pink connector. And here's what's on it. We don't need any of it, of course, just like we didn't need it for the automatic. You won't need it for setting this harness up for a manual transmission either. Just kind of show you what all's on there. And then there's the last few pages of that big brown connector. But again, we don't need any of this. All right, so then we've got J4, which is the small pink connector. We don't need anything on what's on this page, except for this ground at A10. And then on the last page here, there's just one more ground at B9. And that's it. And that's what made the harness that I showed you in this video using to do the programming. And again, just in closing here, I'll give you one more close-up view of this connector that we were talking about. If you went to a Saturn dealership, they would have had all of these back in the time. But, you know, it looks just like the other one, except it's red. And it's got some heft to it. So can't open it up because it's a sealed module, right? And I don't want to destroy it trying to see what's inside. The GM part number on this would have been J41207-PROG2. This would have been actually the Kent-Moore number. And there's a Hewlett-Packard number on there at the time, who was the manufacturer for GM of the original Tech2. Later on, it went to Vertronics, and then eventually to Bosch, and then eventually to China. This particular adapter is not cloned by the Chinese, and it's not made anymore. So your only way of finding one of these is on eBay, you know, or if getting some stuff that was at an old Saturn dealership. I owned a 92 SL2 Saturn in teal green that I special ordered back in the day with ABS and airbag, which was a special order option back then, and sunroof. And I also ordered a matching SL1 for my wife that had the rear roof rack on it. So special place in my heart for Saturns. I wish they hadn't went the way they did. If you had one, you remember those days, go ahead and leave a comment below. I'd love to hear about it. And if you found this video useful and it helped you get your job done, or advise your mechanic on how to get your job done and go find one of these in his old toolbox to program it, go ahead and hit that like button. I would appreciate it. It helps with discovery of the video. And as always, thanks for watching.